7 o'clock now, so we would like to start. Thank you for joining the communication session. And today we are inviting the keynote speaker, Mr. Katsuda, who is not joined yet, I think. So we'll wait for him few more seconds. We sent an email to him, and I think he was in the long session, I guess. So just wait for him. So today we are going to have a keynote talk from Mr. Katsuda, who is a former science representative from the Asahi newspaper, one of the biggest newspaper in Japan. Then I'm going to report, very short report on the awareness survey conducted by KK in the end of August. Then we have panelists from United States, UK, and Japan, and also from the candidate site. So discussing about what they're doing as a communication. Then today we have a special talk from Gary McLeod from Tsukuba University, who is specialized in the visual communication. So we can have some, really interesting view from him. Then we are going to discuss what we should do to make the ILC in reality. So this is today's program. I'm going to start with my short report.
Oh, that's a good idea.
Yeah. So I'm going to share my screen. Can you see my screen now?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So this is a short report about the awareness survey conducted by KK in the end of August this year. So general information is this survey is, purpose I haven't written down yet, but to find out how much people knows about the ILC and what they think of it. So we have this same kind of survey back in 2018, and this is the second survey. So the people are aged between 16 to 69, and gender ratio male 75%, female 25%, and region is Japan-wide and by internet. So the result is 19% know or heard of the ILC. So I told さん声入ってる。さんの声も入ってます。Alright, so back in 2018, the rate was 16%. So slightly increased, but not much. So the question is this 90% good or bad? As you can see, accelerator projects are not known in general. 19% for ILC, 12.8% for LHC, and 15.8% for Super KEKB. And for the light source, it's better known, but 22.8% for Spring 8 and 24.5% for JPark. I think JPark is actually doing very well. So I would say 19% is okay for the project, which is not started yet. But it's not enough, obviously. So how do you feel about the ILC? This is a question. And so the positive thing is rate for the 458 are high number compared to other project. 458 is what? It's a forward-looking project. So they think this is a good project at 26.3%. And people think the ILC is useful. That was kind of surprising. And we did 22.4%. Then H, Japan should promote it, is 22.4%. This is very high number for compared to other project. And negative size is 9 and 11 are very high compared to other projects. So what is 9 and 11? Means 9 is scary, which is 5.3%. And this is second worst rate in the, how many projects we have? 11 project. And number one was ITER. And 11, costly. And it's very expensive. And this was the second worst. The worst one was the International Space Station. Okay. So we also asked about scientific term. So do you know this scientific term? And more than 50% knows Higgs particle. That was kind of surprising result.
Wow.
But they are not associate this word to the accelerator, obviously, because they don't know about the accelerator project, but they know about the term. Also, like Big Bang, neutrino, theory of relativity are known very, very well. It's like more than like 90%, I think. So we should think about these words connecting to the accelerator project, I think. And this is kind of the background, what Japanese people think of the science. So I can share this into the Indigo later, so you can see, read it through more detail. But basically, they like science and they think science is important to the country to advance. But we need to see this question, number 4, I can trust scientists, is half and half. So I think we can do something else to, gain more trust from the public. Okay, so that's all from me. Maybe we can, have this number in your head for the discussion later. Thank you very much.
Okay, now I think we have a presentation by Mr. Toshihiko Katsuda. And as Rika already mentioned, he used to be the science correspondent for Asahi newspaper, which is the national newspaper in Japan with, I think, the third largest circulations. It's a very big national newspaper, and he's been a science correspondent there. And recently, he started to work with KEK. So he has two perspectives of being at the KEK, but of course, looking at the particle physics in general from the outside. And so he is now willing to share his perspective. And he will be speaking Japanese. I will do a sequential translation. So it probably feels a little bit slow. I apologize ahead of time, but hopefully that would work okay. じゃあすいません、勝田さんお願いします。で、一文一文切ってください。
はい。日本の皆さんこんばんは。ヨーロッパの皆さん、こんにちはでしょうか。アメリカの皆さんおはようございます。
Good evening to people in Japan. Good afternoon for people in Europe. Good morning for people in the Americas.
本日はキーノートを呼んでいただきましてありがとうございます。
Thank you for inviting me as a keynote speaker.
KEK の勝田と申します。私は研究者ではなくて、先ほど村山先生から言っていただいたように 6月までは朝日新聞という新聞社におりました。
I am Toshihiko Katsuda from KEK, and as I was already introduced, I was working till this June at the Asahi newspaper as a science correspondent.
記者時代は主に科学技術の取材を担当しておりました。
I was mostly reporting on science and technology issues.
7月以降は KEK で主に広報の仕事をしております。
And I'm now in the public affairs office at KEK since July.
ただ大学では物理学を勉強しまして小さな加速器で実験もしたことがありまして、素粒子物理学には大変興味があります。
I actually majored in physics back in college, and it even did some small experiment with a small accelerator. So I am in general interested in particle physics.
ということで、ILC にはとても期待しているところでございます。
Given that, I'm actually looking forward to see the realization of the ILC.
本日は元科学ジャーナリストとしての立場から話をしてほしいということなので少しお話をいたします。
So I was asked today to speak as the former science correspondent, not at the supporter for ILC.
記者としましては直接 ILC を直接担当していたわけではないのですが、少し離れたところから主に日本国内の議論を見てまいりました。
So I never actually reported on ILC per se, but as a science correspondent, I've been looking at the discussions about ILC from afar.
で、ILC に関する、村山教授の講演やスピーチを聞いたことありますし、KEK が主催する ILC の説明会などでも参加してきました。
I actually listened to Professor Murayama's the talks a few times about IOC, and also I attended some of the media study group at the KEK about IOC as well.
そうした経験から、ジャーナリストから見た現状と提案をお話ししたいと思います。
So given that perspective, I'd like to share my perspective on where IOC stands and how things go.
まず大きな流れとして、加速器科学に限らないですけれども、巨額な経費がかかるビッグサイエンスに対する世の中の逆風といいますか、アゲンストな雰囲気があると思います。
I have to say, not about IOC, but in general, about any big science project, there is a headwind against anything that will be very costly.
例えばかつての冷戦時代の宇宙開発のようなですね、そういう時代ではなくなってきて、最近の世の中の関心というのは、例えば、高齢化、社会の高齢化などもあります。それからコロナも、新型コロナの問題もあります。ライフサイエンスにやはり関心が高いと感じます。
So unlike the era of the Cold War, where there was a race to, for example, the space exploration and stuff like that, these days, the people's interests are more towards aging society, coronavirus, and basically more in the life science area rather than physical sciences.
そしてもう一点、もう一つ加速科学にとって大きなチャレンジになると思いますのは、カーボンニュートラルの問題です。
So another big issue against accelerator-based science would be the carbon neutral society.
ちょうど、来週ですか、英国で、国際会議、COP26 というのが開かれますけれども、やはり世界的な関心としましては、やはり、低炭素社会への道筋を描けということになってますので、大量の電力を使う加速器科学でもそういうところが求められると思います。
Indeed, the next week, there will be a new meeting, COP26, about the carbon neutral society. So when the entire society is moving towards carbon neutral society, then the power-hungry machine like accelerator will be an issue.
はい。そういう中で、私たちはどのようなコミュニケーションをすることで、この、いわゆる逆風の中をですね、泳ぎ切ることができるのかということを考えてみたいと思います。
So in that circumstance, in this headwind, how do we swim against the headwind in these circumstances to support accelerator-based science?
道筋はいくつかあると思います。
I see several avenues.
まず一つはですね、正攻法なんですけれども、基礎研究の価値を語ることだと思います。
The first thing is basically grapple head on this issue, why basic science is important.
宇宙とは何なのか、私たちはどこから来たのか、どこへ向かうのかといったことなんですが、こういったことはコミュニケーションは多分これまでもずっとされていることだと思います。
The questions like what is the universe, where do we come from, where we're going. So I understand that this kind of public outreach had been done already, and that we should continue doing so.
ただ、語り方だとかですね、語る、立場の方が違ってもう少しいろいろ工夫の余地はあるのかと思っています。
However, I see that there must be there could be more ways of doing it by using people from different perspectives and different the roles. So I have the perception that talking about a particle physics or accelerator for general public is not an easy task.
一方で、宇宙とか天文っていうのは非常に関心が高いっていうことは私が新聞記者でやっていた経験からもすごく感じるところです。
On the other hand, as a former reporter, I do see that the interest in astronomy and the universe has been very high among the general public.
ですので、同じことを語るにしても、物理学者の立場、加速器科学の立場でもいいんですけれども、天文学の立場とか宇宙物理学の立場からもう少し別の方にですね、角度を変えて語っていただくと、関心が高くなるんではないかと思います。
So given that, talking about the accelerator or physics is less appealing than trying to connect it to the issues of universe and cosmology and astrophysics.
それが一つの考え方です。
That's one thing I've been thinking about.
で、それとも関連するんですけど、もう一つ強調しておきたいなと思うのは、
Okay, so that's one thing. And then the second point I would like to emphasize is the following.
はい、強調しておきたいのは、科学者自身が語り、科学者の姿を見せるということだと思います。
It is actually important that scientists themselves will be in front of people and talk and let them expose to the public. People need to see scientists.
誰かがそういうふうにこれをやりたいと言ってるんじゃなくて、誰かっていうかですね、この人が言っている。よくアンバサダーとかですね、そういった言い方するときありますけど、そういう役割の人をですね、顔が見える人が、ぜひやりたいと言っているっていうような姿を見せることだと思います。
So that telling people that, well, somebody wants to have this machine is not going to make an appeal. It really has to be the scientists themselves, show themselves and speak to the public that I would like to do this.
やはり私たちはですね、人に関心があるんですね。
Generally, people are interested in people.
私も去年まではノーベル賞の報道にも長年携わってきましたけれども、もちろんどんな研究をされたかも大事ですし、そういったことにも関心を持たれるんですけれども、一方で、大衆っていうのはですね、パブリックっていうのは、どんな人がこの研究やってるんだろうと、どんな人がなぜやってるんだろう、そういったことに非常に関心を持ちます。
So I've been reporting on Nobel Awards in the last many years as a reporter. And of course, reporting about the research work that led to the prize itself is very important. But more generally, people are more interested in who they are, why are they doing it, what they have done.
そういうところですから ILC を推進しようとしている、研究者自身がですね、もっと姿を見せて、私はどうしてこんなことやりたいのか、で私はどういう、研究をしてきたのかとかですね、研究そのものではなくても、その人自身を語るということが世間の関心を呼び起こすと思います。
So given that context, I believe that the scientists who want to promote ILC should come in front of people and talk to the public themselves and get them known why they're interested in it and who they are and why they want to do this.
ということで、基礎科学の価値もそうですし、そのやってる人がどういう人なのかということもなんですけれども、ここで強調したいなと思うのはストーリーという言葉です。
So in addition, 2 points already made about the importance of basic science in general, and this scientists showing themselves to the general public and talk to the public. The third important thing is what I would like to call the story behind it.
はい。例えばですね、上岡でよく知られています、日本の、光電子導媒管を作った浜本フォトニクスという会社がありますけども、そういう小さな会社の開発の話なんかに多くの人が共感しました。
For example, the Super Kamiokande is based on the technology of photomolecular tubes developed by Hamamatsu Photonics Company, which is a small company in a rural area, and that story really resonated with the general public.
それから、日本の、小惑星探査機はやぶさのケースでも、はやぶさが地球に帰還できなくなりそうになって大変多くの人が注目をして関心を持って共感したということがありました。それがはやぶさの第2号機の予算化にもつながったという事実があります。
Another example is a space probe JAXA has launched called Hayabusa. It went to the asteroid and it was almost not coming back because of the failures. But somehow it managed to come back after lots of troubles, and that story really resonated with people. So without this kind of incident, probably second mission, Hayabusa 2, would not have been approved.
これらのプロジェクトはいずれも実行された後のストーリーなので、語りやすいわけですが、ILC の場合、これからなので、ストーリーを語ると確かに難しいところはあるかもしれません。
Of course, these stories are stories after the fact, that after the mission or in the midst of construction, and IOC is yet to happen. So telling a story about IOC is still difficult at this stage, I understand.
ですが、何かやはり描けるものがあるんではないかと思います。これまでの開発にいろんな人が関わってきてですね、たくさんのいろんなアイデアが出されて、計画も変わってきてるわけですから、そういうようなストーリーをですね、語る。しかもそれは物理学者がですね、物理学者でなくてもいい、他のむしろ物理学者以外の方でもいいと思うんですけれども、顔を見せる形でストーリーを語ることで、より多くの人が関心を持ってもらえるんではないかと考えています。
Even though IOC itself is yet to happen, there had been many decades of development that happened already, and many people were involved. So I suppose there are stories one can tell if those people are willing to show themselves to the general public and start telling those stories about it.
そうすることで、ILC をより知ってもらい、応援してもらうと。そして最終的には世論が動き、政府も動くという、そういうことになっていくのではないかと思います。
And those storytellers don't need to be physicists, anybody involved in sort of development of ideas or the equipment and technology. And if those people would show themselves to the general public and tell those stories, and that would be a way of getting IOC better known and eventually win public support.
ということで、今回のセッションがですね、そういうストーリーを何か、考えていただくですね、何かきっかけになればと思ってお話しいたしました。ありがとうございました。
So I'm hoping that this session would stimulate discussions about how to come up with those stories and how to tell them in this session. So that's my hope of being here today. Thank you so much for your attention. ありがとうございました。
ありがとうございました。
素晴らしかったです。Back to Rika.
Thank you very much, Katsuda-san and Murayama-san for translation. It will stimulate our discussion later. Thank you, Katsuda-san. And all the questions will be taken later in the discussion session. So if you have any question, you can write in the chat if you want, or ask the question in the discussion session after that. Thank you very much. So we are moving to roundtable. So all the people are highlighted now, I guess.
Please turn on the video, the panelists.
So all the panelists, please turn on your video so we can highlight you.
I can't find the Daniel.
I'm here. I'm here. Yes.
And video on?
Video on.
He's on.
Okay. And Gary, please turn on your video, please.
Yeah, here we go.
Thank you very much. So this is a 9 total. It's up to 9. So I'm sorry, Amy-san. We will switch from the Iwate. So I'm set. Please go ahead.
Okay, thank you, Kikuchi-san. So now we are moving to the roundtable. And as I asked you, thank you very much for being, being a panelist in this session. And I'd like you to give us some insight or tell us your activity about communication, by scientists in your region. And I would like to start in from the US. So can Murayama-san start or?
Oh, I should start. Okay. So from the US, there are two people here, myself and Chip Rock from Michigan State University. And both of us have been doing actually the same thing in the US, namely that it's important to gain interest and support from other physicists in a different areas. And for example, condensed matter physics and astrophysicists. So both of us have been actually giving many colloquia across the country at many different departments to talk about why particle physics is interesting, why discovery of the Higgs is not the end of the story. There's more to come. And of course, IOC should be placed in that part of the story. So that's the common activity we've been doing. And Chip, you should chime in to tell us more about it.
Yeah, my interest in this came from the snowmass process in the United States that came in 2013 after the discovery in 2012. I was chair of the DPF, the Division of Particles and Fields at the time, and we had kind of held off on doing a global survey until the discovery was actually announced. Of course, we knew it was coming. And that process was unique for us in the United States. It had not really been the case that the community effort of snowmass was directly coupled to the governmental effort in the high energy physics advisory panel and a charged study of the future of particle physics. And we worked really hard in order to couple those two things together so that one fed the other. So that went okay. And one day I was riding on an elevator with a biologist, and he said, "So you found the Higgs boson, now you're done, right?" And so that became sort of a, oh my goodness, you know, we've so sold the Higgs boson discovery as a focus that nobody really has any reason to recognize the nuance and the complications that are actually involved now that we've actually got a particle with a quantum numbers of the vacuum, and just how strange that is. And so we started out in the DPF thinking about a crew of people that would in fact do inreach to our colleagues in physics departments as colloquia. And that effort turned out to be sort of Hitoshi and me sort of independently doing this. And so every year, 2 or 3 times a year since 2015, I get a call and I'm asked to give a colloquium in a physics department where I, of course, focus on condensed matter physicists and astrophysicists and, you know, people who are not typically in tune with or aware of just how complicated Higgs boson is and what that means for both a historical picture, because I like to concentrate on the history. In fact, I spend about a third of my talk on the history of the Standard Model and just how seeing the world through the lens of the Higgs boson really leads us to lots of questions and not necessarily tying the whole thing up in a bow and being done. So I have a lot of fun with this, and it's not a public effort on my part. It's talking to the folks that I kind of think I know best, namely colleagues in physics departments who are not like me.
Thank you, Chip. And in addition, of course, my activity in the US, I also work in Japan as well. And in Japan, I've been trying to publicize IOC as much as I can. I wrote a book on particle physics, which sold more than 300,000 copies. I aired in TV shows like playing the role of Carl Sagan in Cosmos 3 times on the national broadcast NHK. So there was a lot of publicity, but it's clear even that was not enough according to Rika's survey results. So what can I do to actually make it better? I'm in some sense lost. So what I really would like to learn from discussion today about what else should be done. Okay.
You also had a very popular Coursera course.
That's right. Yeah. That was viewed by more than, again, 100,000 people around the world.
Yeah.
Good, thank you. So going to Europe, Aidan and Barbara.
Barbara,
Which
shall
one
I start?
Go ahead.
Okay,
you're
I'll
the
say
scientist.
something briefly. I hope that my internet connection remains stable. And so I'll also what Katsuda-san has said really resonated with me in terms of priorities for communication. That people are interested in other people, and it's really important that scientists show themselves and tell the stories. And I think that in terms of international support for the ILC, we have an extra dimension that the project is very far away, and there can be a perception that scientists are other people doing things somewhere else that I think we have to break down. And so in the sorts of activities that I do locally here, I think a really important message is that in my local example, there are 60 particle physicists in the experimental group here in Glasgow. And we're the people doing the science. We're traveling back and forward to the labs. There's really a local presence there. And I think more generally, in all the public engagement activities that we do, we see that it's the interactions with working physicists that people really seem to appreciate. So the chance to chat, to see scientists as real people that they can relate to and who take their questions seriously. So it's not just a one-way information dump. And so one initiative I've been involved in over the last few years, which I think is really effective, are virtual visits to CERN, because I think what I've just said applies to the LHC just as much as to the ILC. And so virtual visits are where there's somebody on site at CERN. So it could be me or it could be somebody else in the control room or underground. And then the group is remotely. So this all started before the pandemic. So it could be a classroom of young people or more recently, just individuals joining via Zoom. And the format of the hour-long session is to spend maybe 20 or 25 minutes talking and showing people around. So taking them on a tour around the Atlas Cavern or the control room or wherever you are. And then devoting about half the time to questions and answers. And it's amazing what you get back. And so then you have this real interaction, this real engagement. And I wonder whether that's something that KEK already does or something that we could introduce or just use more widely as a tool for communication. So then another aspect that we've been focused on in Europe and in the UK in particular, again, about relating to all sorts of people, is to emphasize the range of jobs and roles that are associated with a big accelerator lab, like the ILC lab would be, so that it's not just the accelerator physicists and fundamental science physicists that people might immediately think of, but an initiative like this takes engineers and technicians of all sorts, administrators of all kinds, translators, all sorts of different skills that can really appeal to a broad range of people. And so somewhere like the ILC lab can be a really aspirational place to work for people with all sorts of interests. And I just wonder whether that's an aspect of the ILC that has been prominent enough. And then the third and last thing I wanted to raise was about the way that we as physicists communicate to the media, because I see that sometimes things are just reported in a way that aren't optimal for us. And I take as one example, on the radio this morning, the main UK news radio programme, there was a discussion of the microboon results. Now, it's fantastic that it was covered, but the person they chose to interview was a US-based American scientist. And it would have been even better if they'd taken one of the British people working on that, again, to make this close connection between the science and the people that you're really trying to talk to. And I've no idea why. There could have been all sorts of reasons why it was a US person. But again, one action that we've tried to take is to have media days, national media days at CERN, where all sorts of media representatives from a particular country come and they meet the scientists directly, and you have tours and have one-to-one discussions. And in general, that seems to be quite effective. That then they go back and just a bit more alert to what's going on and who's doing it. So yeah, those were the three things I wanted to highlight that I think are trends in Europe, but that I think we can learn from for the ILC as well. Thanks.
Yeah, I agree with everything that's been said, and I wanted to thank Katsuda-san for his talk as well and all the other points that were raised. because it also really resonated with me. It's true that we always need a person to connect with, and we need the story behind the scientist and behind this scientific effort to really understand and connect emotionally, which is an important thing. So I totally agree with that. I also liked what our US colleagues or our colleagues based in the US said. The inReach, we're at a point at the moment where we need to communicate to the general public, of course, to get basic support for the ILC, but we also need to unite the community behind us in order to be able to speak with one voice. And that is something that scientists can do much better than us communicators. I'm a communicator, I'm not a scientist. But I think what is very important and what hasn't been said yet is that we need to work together on this. So us communicators, we can provide you with, I don't know, animations, with pictures, with facts, with things, with contacts, with the media that you can then use to get this message across. And that's something that we're very happy to do, of course. So it's not us saying, you guys go out there and communicate the ILC for us, but I think we need to do it together. And I think we're going to be more efficient and effective if we do it together. And then just one very general thing that hasn't been mentioned yet is social media. I think we can expand on that. I see somebody nodding. Veronica is like, yes, yeah. It's very nice. So anything that moves, any moving image, always captures people's attention and imagination. So I know you will all hate me for saying this, but TikTok might be a new channel that we could use, and also expand on videos and YouTube things, anything. We have a couple of people who are very active on Twitter, and that's very, very nice. Also for us official communicators, because scientists can take this personal approach to things. They can voice opinions, and they can put things into perspective and into context, which is something that the official communication person of a project is not really able to do. So we would always remain a bit more distant and yeah, official, whereas this human perspective is carried by the scientists.
But just in case that you're not aware of this, so Barbara has been the public relation officer at DAISY for many years. And she has been working as the IOC communicator a part of her time during her tenure at DAISY. And recently she became a free woman to work on IOC as much as she can. And she has been a great resource for us. And she's been editing LC newsletters and stuff like this. So we've been working together for a long time. And Rika is the IOC communicator, dedicated IOC communicator at the KK. And that's why she's organizing the session. And both of them have been great resource to us. But many of you may not have known this. So it's a great opportunity to meet each other and so that we can work together.
And Perrine also just joined, I saw. So she's number
there?
3 in the team.
I'm sorry I was late, but I'm here now.
Oh, yeah. She has been also on the team, both under LCC and now on IDT as well. So these 3 people have been really important for IOC communication.
So thank you very much. So going to Japan. So please speak. So Daniel and Jurina, which one go first?
Okay, I can go first, I don't mind. So I'm a bit of a strange situation. I'm a foreigner in Japan who doesn't really communicate in Japanese at all. So that makes my role, I think, a little bit limited. But I do a little bit of communication, much less than many of the others in this room, I think. So I've, KK, or Rika-san in particular, organizes, or Rika-san and colleagues organizes a science cafe here in Tsukuba. So I think there was a 1 week or so, 1 month series of science cafes on ILC, if I remember correctly, about a year or so ago, in which I took part. And then there's also a wider series of, they call themselves a Nerd Night, that's based in Tokyo. It's organized by foreigners in Japan, science communicators and theater people and things like this. They have 2 or 3 talks in a relaxed atmosphere with beer and drinking and scientific talks. So that was a fun experience, and I got some, I think, some reasonably good feedback from the audience. I enjoyed that. On the social media side, I try to do a little bit on Twitter, and here maybe I have some questions for communicators. So I try to keep it quite concentrated on ILC. I see many other Twitter accounts try to add in a lot of personal information as well, what the cat looks like or what they had for dinner or things like this. So I'd like to have your opinion. Is this a good thing to do? What ratio of personal to the main message should be put on social media?
Well, I think you just heard the person behind the science is always fascinating. So if you have a cat or anything other personal things to share, that please go ahead.
Okay, I think that's all from me. But I'm enjoying this discussion and I'm learning many interesting things. Thanks.
Yeah, we actually did the survey on our Twitter account, which kind of information, our followers are looking for. And the first pick was the life of the scientist. So everybody is, waiting for the life of the scientist information. So please, tweet that all the time.
Okay.
Okay, so Jurina?
Yes, Harold, I'm a second year master student at Sokendai in KK. As a student, I speak my activity and my feelings. My PR activities also spreading ILC newsline or workshop on Twitter and Facebook. And also, I sometimes talk about my ILC study and ILC information at a community made of students from different fields. But this community is not open, so not open. And I think Katsuda-san also talked about it. I think it should collaborate more with people from different fields when we promote ILC community on social media because one of past ILC PR activity was ILC talk at KK Open House. This activity is collaborate rakugo, Japanese traditional comic storytelling. In this time, I got good response for familiar science people. So my guess, why unfamiliar people, science familiar people, good response. My guess, different entertainment too encourage people who are not familiar with science understand ILC. And as a student, it would be good if there are opportunity for student activity involved in PR. So I would like to see more events, science museum or science communication. For example, science show. Like this event, it seems easy for students to involve, take part. So that's all. Back to Rika-san.
Thank you very much for important, opinion from young scientists. That's great. So moving to the candidate site communicators, we have 4 people joining today. So maybe we switch the highlight to
Sorry, just a moment, please. Okay.
Here we are.
Okay. Okay. Please go ahead. I will spotlighting it by one.
Okay. So let's go first. Please give us the short introduction of yourself, and please tell us, the people in the candidate site area are very, very active for the ILC communication. And we really thank them for that. And maybe they have something to say, like what we can do for them. So please give us your opinion.
Okay. How about we start? Well, just all four of us will. How about we introduce ourselves? But first off, let me say it's so nice to see many of you again. Long time no see. This is Amanda Wayama in Iwate. And nice to see everybody. Yeah, for those who don't know me, I work for the Iwate Prefectural Government. So Iwate Prefecture is the sort of province that holds the Kitakami candidate site. And they have a ILC promotion bureau that works to promote the project within Iwate, within the country, and then to abroad as well. And so while I'm involved with many different sort of promotion efforts for Iwate, one of those is the ILC project. And then we also have Ms. Yagi.
Hello, I'm Natsumi Yagi, and I am the staff from the Iwate ILC Promotion Council. And also I work for the Chamber of Commerce and Industry. And basically my work is about to support local companies and local leaders in Morioka City, which is the prefectural capital city. So I will explain relation between the Promotion Council and the Chamber of Commerce Industry later. So Aimi-san or Veronica-san, dozo.
How about Aimi?
All right. Hello.
Veronica, okay.
Oh, is it okay?
Yes.
Okay. So hi, I'm Veronica Dow. I'm with the Oshu ILC Promotion Center. So Oshu is a little further south than Morioka. It's basically on the candidate site. It's a little further away than Morioka though by bullet train. And yes, so I will introduce more later. Ivy, also.
Hello everyone. I'm Aimi and I work at Ichinoseki ILC's ILC division, and I'm an internationalization coordinator. Briefly, what I do there is more like translation, interpreting, and running social media accounts about the ILC and the ILC website in English. And I also promote Ichinoseki, which is the very southern point of Iwate. And it's the main area where the ILC will be constructed if the plans do go ahead. So yes, we'll be talking a little bit about how we have been promoting the ILC in a little bit. Yep, thank you.
Hey, thank you. First, I'll just explain what Iwate Prefecture, the local government, has been doing to promote the ILC project within mainly Iwate, but the rest of Japan as well. In a typical year, we hold many seminars and lectures around the prefecture. So we'll have maybe a huge attendance in like the local convention hall within Morioka City, it's the capital city. We'll have those sorts of events. We'll invite scientists and researchers to talk about the ILC and you know, anything from the science behind the ILC to how the project itself is moving forward practically. What are the latest goings on? And so we have sorts of things in big convention halls, or, you know, we can go, there's tiny little community halls on the coast where the staff members of the ILC Promotion Bureau itself will go and talk to maybe an audience of 10 to 20 people, local people living in the area. And, you know, all of these are just sort of about an hour-long talk about the ILC, taking questions from the local people in Iwate and explaining what's going on recently with the project. I think maybe what's majorly different from the rest of all of the participants today is that we're mainly, you know, none of us here in the Iwate Prefecture government are scientists or researchers, and we're not per se doing science communication. We basically learn from all of you. what the project is all about, and then we sort of explain it from more, a layperson to layperson sort of thing. So while it's hard for us to answer in-depth scientific questions, we can talk about, what's the project schedule looking like? How might this affect Iwate Prefecture and the people living here in the future? And just like what Aidan mentioned about what kind of jobs would be available at the Iwate or at the ILC? How can people here get involved in the future? So those are some major communication efforts that are going on here. And it's not just in Iwate. There are, we'll set up booths at big exhibitions in the Tokyo area. There was the Vacuum 2019 exhibition where they set up a booth for a couple of days. And just sort of talking as much as we can with both local people and the people rest of Japan. And of course, we set up with local festivals and other things, cultural events as well. There's the huge drum parade festival in Morioka every year, and they set up a whole team that sort of marches with the ILC banner. There's the craft beer festival in Ichinoseki. I think Aimi can talk more about that. We set up a booth there. I think we had, there's a Japanese mascot character for the Higgs particle, because they have a they have a character for everything. And so, set up the little kids who want to hang out with this little blue guy, those sorts of things. So it's really just talking with people in the community directly, sort of like one by one, kind of a community-based effort. One more thing that they do is they also have a program with the local high schools. There are a number of schools, I believe it's 8 right now, in Iwate that are designated as ILC promotion model schools. And they'll go and they'll give seminars about the ILC to the students there. And then throughout the school year, these students will give presentations on the ILC or related matters. And they sort of base their school year around periodically talking about the ILC. So really educating young children about what could be happening in 20, 30 years time. Well, sooner rather than later, I hope, in ILC. Even one of my favorite stories is that one of the agricultural high school is actually one of these schools, and the local students have actually created ILC themed products. Like they've worked on there's sort of an ILC branded apple, which some of you who've been to Morioka for the LCWS in 2016 might have seen this. A very simple idea, really, really cool. More recently, they've created ILC cookies and they've sold them throughout the area. So those sorts of things, I think for us, while we don't have as many opportunities for scientists and researchers to talk directly and do science communication directly, I think Iwate has been successful in sort of raising awareness of the project, especially within Iwate Prefecture, because this is anecdotal. We don't have nice survey data like Rika-san just showed us, but 9 times out of 10, if you ask anyone in Iwate who lives in Iwate, do you know about the ILC project? And they will say yes. Of course, I'm not really sure what goes on there, but I know that it's a scientific project that could happen in Iwate Prefecture. And so I think that's at least one measure of success, at least within Iwate. The next step is the national level. And next, Yagi-san will talk about basically what they've been doing at the Chamber of Commerce level, the ILC Promotion Council.
So I think I have to explain why I'm here. I work for Morioka Chamber of Commerce in industry, and the process is a bit complicated, but since this ILC project is expected to have a great impact on local companies, so the Chamber of Commerce in Industry has been tasked with the ILC Promotion Council. So I've been in charge of it for the last 3 years. So I'm going to tell you what we have done these 2 years, last 2 years. So in order to promote the ILC, we have been holding lectures on the ILC almost every year, cooperation with local governments. The 2 lectures held in the last 2 years was conducted using Zoom like this, like we are right now. The total number of participants is about 1,300. And through my experience communicating with local business leaders, I believe their interest to the ILC project is not only about the science and its effects, but also they are interested in as a great opportunity to give young people and children a chance to develop their, interest in science. So I think the local business leaders, they're always looking for opportunities to expand their knowledge. They're excited about new things. So they think that establishment of a big science facility like the ILC in Tohoku, which is a kind of different place from urban areas such as Tokyo, is a big deal, not only for their own business, but also for young people. That's all I wanted to say. So I'm San Veronica san, どうぞ.
All right, I'll go first if that's okay with you. So in a typical year, we will, let's see, can you hear me?
Yes.
Good. So in a typical year, we'll hold explanation sessions about what the ILC is, safety measures, that sort of thing, to both the general public and various interested parties. We'll also do booths, very similar to the prefectural branch, such as the Galaxy Fest, hosted by the Mizusawa National Observatory of Japan, with the Oshu Astronomy Museum, as well as miscellaneous summer festivals that we have down here. We also do guest classes about the ILC to local elementary schools. So usually 5th and 6th graders, and we'll just kind of give a basic explanation about what the ILC is and what we're hoping to learn from it, as well as how it's going to actually affect the children's lives. Because hopefully when it comes to fruition, they'll probably be young adults. So we want them to think about how this might affect your future careers or your future life, because basically it could affect pretty much something this big can affect pretty much everyone's lives. So we really want to stimulate their imaginations and their curiosity, and hopefully perhaps an interest in science as well. We also have 2 ILC promotional model schools in town. We have Mizusawa High School and Mizusawa Tech, and they both do similar things as Amanda mentioned previously. On the internationalization end, I actually produce the multilingual newsletter every month. So we have that now in English, Chinese, and plain Japanese for people who are still learning Japanese. And that has all sorts of information. Right now, there's a lot of stuff about corona and health, as you might imagine, but also things about public safety, taxes, how to pay taxes. Let me see, events, classes, sports events, holiday closures, all kinds of things, just to make it a more welcoming event for non-Japanese residents. Our international center also has a really cool pioneering medical interpreting system, which is where we dispatch medical interpreters all around southern Iwate. So right now we've been working with mass vaccination centers as well. And I think that's been a really cool thing to be a part of, just making the environment more welcoming to international residents. And finally, around town, there's a lot of like murals, billboards, libraries will sometimes set up an ILC corner with Murayama sensei's book, and all sorts of other things about about the ILC and particle physics. So it's really, you can see it almost everywhere. And as Amanda said, local awareness, I think, is really high. And I think most people also have a pretty positive view in general of the project, even if they can't necessarily tell you about the details. Oh, one more thing too. We also have a website called the Kitakami Times, in which we publish things about this area. And it's a really good archive for our activities in the past and what we've been doing in the future, just because this last year has been so, it's been a little difficult. So if you want to get a sense of what we've been doing before now, I would really encourage people to take a look, to check it out. I would say in Oshu, we've been working really hard to make a welcoming environment for the ILC, both scientifically and on the social side, on the cultural side. So thank you very much.
Okay, so it's my turn now, I think. So communicating the ILC to the local community is very important in Ichinoseki because it's where, you know, the construction is going to be done mainly. So not only do we need to strengthen the science communication side of things, but we have to explain the scale of the project, the benefits of the project, how the city is going to go about promoting the project, and addressing any concerns that citizens may have in terms of the construction of the ILC. And I'll go over some of our promotional efforts quite quickly, I'm sorry, but yeah. We've got ILC special classes at junior high schools across Ichinoseki. These are a collaboration with KEK, so we set up cloud chamber experiments, and the students get to ask scientists questions, things like that. We arrange various lectures at high schools, and this is basically about the influence of the ILC, and the students get to think about city development and the impacts of a lot of people coming into the city. And we set up Q&A sessions with experts on the ILC at public centres to make sure that anyone who has questions can get their say. And we have science cafes as well, and you know, we can invite a range of scientists over to talk about their field of studies. We have people from JAXA as well that came the other time, so they're quite popular. And we also do kids science events, and these are like fun hands-on science experiences for children across Ichinoseki and Hiraizumi. We also have a lot of signage around Ichinoseki, as well as exhibitions. I think the biggest one would be the one at Ichinoseki Station, and it has the most foot traffic in the whole city. And there's like a big ILC display and like lights that go in and do this. So it's quite awesome, I think. And then at that exhibition area, we've got pamphlets that are in English and Japanese for people to take. And one of the pamphlets is this ILC news pamphlet. This one has a lot of major news that happened. This is 2018, but we've got major news with the ILC symposium where Barry Barish and Sheldon Glashow came to Tokyo, and we have some local news about, you know, the beer festival and the ILC. And as Amanda said, this is Higgs mascot here. There's a lot of people in the background, so there was a big event about the ILC at the beer festival, and we also have like a comic to appeal to younger people to understand what the ILC is. So this pamphlet is distributed to citizens of Ichinoseki, every household. And before COVID, this was 4 times a year. So I'd say that this is one of our biggest projects. And let's see. But with COVID, yeah, we used to have festivals like the beer festival and the mochi festival and summer festivals where we would promote the ILC and would give out little ILC merchandise. We have lots of different things like fans and like plastic folders and things. But yeah. And also because of COVID, you know, being in person, doing in-person events has been very difficult. But because of the online events, we've had people from different areas of Japan being able to join our science events. But we also know that there's a lot of people who need information who don't have internet. So we have to make sure that we have these in-person talks. And yeah, so Ichinoseki has been promoting the ILC for almost a decade now. And we're very eager to find fresh ways to go about the promotion. And yeah, we know, as Amanda said, that we're not science communicators ourselves. So I think it's essential that we connect with science communicators more often, so we can make sure that we have interesting content and expose the ILC to citizens in the most effective way. And yeah, so during my years in Ichinoseki, I think that most people have an idea or heard of the ILC. And looking at the surveys of the city, many people are interested in things like the development of local industry, new business chances, and younger generations are even more interested in things like internationalization and leisure. And on a different survey, we have people who want to be involved in the ILC, like it's something more than half of the people that we surveyed said they want to be involved, but they don't know how. So we have to make sure that we provide ways that they can get involved. Yeah, so I think it doesn't all have to be about science communication, but I think lots of people want to know how it impacts them. And yeah, as Katsuda-san said also, I think maybe we should focus on fields as well that are seen more important in our modern climate, like try to tie in the ILC with that. Yeah, so we look forward to progress, and we hope to keep up the enthusiasm and understanding in the city. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, everyone. And as you see, many communication activities are ongoing, but still we have this 90%. So maybe we can discuss how we can make it more effective. But before going to discussion, we want to have a view from the different viewpoint from Gary, who is an assistant professor of the Tsukuba University. He is not a physicist, and I think we have very important and interesting views. So please, Gary, so switch to only highlighting Gary maybe.
He's a professor of photomedia and visual design. So
yeah,
suddenly,
yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, suddenly there's a lot of pressure on me to come up with solutions. So I'll do my best to sort of convey a bunch of stuff to everybody today. If you don't mind, I am going to share some slides because it's very difficult for me to do this without images. Can everybody see that? Is that clear to everybody? Okay, great. So I mean, Rika, I think I have 10 minutes, right? That's what you said.
I have more if you want.
I'll try and stick to 10 because I'd prefer to sort of keep the discussion going. Thank you for this invitation to participate in this panel. I mean, I've been listening, and everything that everyone has said so far in this roundtable has been stimulating, resonating, and very thought-provoking in multiple ways. So I'm coming to this as not a physicist. I come to this as was mentioned, as someone with a background in photomedia and visual communication. That's what I teach at Tsukuba, in University of Tsukuba. All my students are design students generally, of which they are undergraduate, masters, or PhD level. Now, why am I even here? It's probably this kind of question that might be on your mind. I have a recent interest in the ILC, and it's kind of grown out of being in Iwate Prefecture for other photographic reasons. So I've been visiting Iwate, specifically coastal cities, for about 2 years now. And I've been doing this for a research project, which was looking at photomedia literacy and temporality. Notice I'm using the word photomedia rather than photography, and there's something very particular about that which I thought I'll come back to if there's time. So in this 2 years, I've been working on sort of trying to understand changes in the coastal cities, obviously since 2011, but also kind of trying to reach further back in time before that. The region, not before and after the tsunami, but more in terms of understanding what normality is and what normality is for everybody today. Obviously, that word has been heavily distorted by COVID, etc. So a lot of this is sort of revolving around my understanding of something called rephotography, which is going back to the same place again and again and again over time, which is something I'm writing a book about. Rephotography is essentially this recording change as it happens over time. We all do it, we all see it, we've all familiar with these kind of examples of then and then again and these kinds of things. But as someone who studied visual media for most of my life, this is not so much a series of images as it is an opportunity for discussion. because making these kind of pitches creates conversation in the places where you are at. And it leads to certain events and things arising, which can take you by surprise and lead you in new directions, which is why I'm here. I was photographing in Ofanato and I came across the ILC leaflet in the tourist center in Ofanato City, and I took it away with me and ruminated on it for quite some time and started doing research around it. And now I have a Kakenhi project sort of put in for funding in the hope that I can start documenting the landscape during the pre-lab phase. That's my hope. But I've obviously hearing everybody's difficulties and frustrations, or the 19%, I am sort of inclined to try and help before the pre-lab phase, because obviously there's no pre-lab phase if the thing doesn't ever happen. So I kind of feel like I have this invested interest, which is kind of growing over the time. So what I'm going to try and share is sort of my take on essentially where visual communication is at. As I said, I'm not a scientist, and it would be kind of inappropriate to call me an artist as well in that sense. I used to, but that's former ego self. My background is in art and design, fine arts, digital arts, and photography, and mostly I work in visual communication. And when I say in visual communication, I really mean on visual communication rather than sort of advertising or such like that. I'm more likely to comment on it than I am actually to go work in a company and try to change from within. So that's why I'm in a teaching institution. That's why I teach students. I'm teaching them to use images responsibly. I'm teaching them to try and create dialogue and conversation with communities. And I'm not the only person in this faculty doing that, thankfully. So I'm not alone. So a key point I want to underline here is education around visual communication. Visual literacy, as it is known, is often downplayed to understanding a graphic on a slide or a tiny photo which shows a piece of machinery or equipment that everybody's familiar with, apart from those who are not. And there's some level of recognition, and there's always a question of you got to get to know it, sort of thing. Now, this is all fine and well, but visual literacy is actually much more than that. And visual literacy kind of carries the same sort of power you might need to try and understand the difference between these two sorts of pictures. Visual literacy is critical for separating these two in their significance, essentially. So that's why visual literacy is important. Not for Kermit the Frog, but just generally for how we engage with images. Now, there are three categories which are typically associated with visual literacy. This is visual reading, visual writing, and then there's these other visual literacy skills like visual thinking, etc. Now, this is all there's a whole field of this. There's also the International Visual Literacy Association, and there's a lot of concerted effort to try and address the presence of this, and that's kind of partly what I'm doing as well here. So what I've noticed in my experience in teaching, rather anecdotally, is that there's an emphasis often in the visual reading, but not so much on the visual writing, and certainly not so much in the visual literacy skills, in the visual thinking skills either. So what I tend to do in my teaching is really emphasizing this writing with images, which often doesn't require talking about it, or it shouldn't do, because language can be a barrier. So this is sort of what I'm trying to get across. So it's not as easy as it sounds. Sort of lose my place here a minute. The way I approach all of this is essentially through photomedia literacy, or photomedia in general. So because lots of people are familiar with images, we're surrounded by them all the time. Every lecture's got them in it in some form or another, and we're all expected to sort of consume them in some ways. But there's just less emphasis on writing it. But how do you get people just to start making more images? Lots of large companies have tried that, and often it just results in pictures of lunch and stuff. And I access lots of people in a simple, easier way to get them thinking about images critically, or thinking about how they make their images critically. And photomedia tends to be the way to sort of doing that. Now, when I talk about photomedia, it used to be known as photography. You could consider it photography, but photomedia is ultimately much more expansive. It is dealing with anything that is light which is mediated. And that stretches from analog techniques using 8x10 film cameras, etc., some very sort of conservative type media, straight through to the sort of thermal cameras and the measuring techniques we're starting to see in buildings, and also Pokemon Snap to a certain extent. So all of this counts as photomedia in our field, right? Which is something that often gets lost in all of this because it's a game or it's just a technology. So we tend to sort of lose sight of these kinds of things. So as I said, I'm interested in this part. And this is where I'm really trying to sort of work on through things. We could say that this is all down to ability, which is great. But of course, how do we get people to engage with that as an ability? How do we get some people to improve it? Anyone, of course, can use a camera. Anyone can push a button at a desirable moment and then share it. So what I'm referring to here is really, is not just how to use cameras and take better photos, right? That, to be absolutely clear, I'm not teaching people how to take better photos, whatever better means. Teaching them to question the word better, if anything. But I am learning and encouraging the students to learn how images are mediated by the devices and processes involved, and where the creators themselves, you, me, and everybody who's pushing the button, can actually intervene in this. So this is part of a series of illustrations a student in my lab is working on for the graduation project. It highlights the contrary to some pockets of thought that the workings of digital camera are not magic. And this, of course, is where cats can be useful, apparently, to get attention. Now, obviously, it's not cats all the way down, but you hopefully get the idea. Cats are better than supposedly magic. So this all seems relatively straightforward, but there are challenges to this. And the most common of this is that the most successful photomedia is the camera-enabled smartphone. And while this sounds incredibly promising and great and democratic, don't worry, I'm not knocking it. I do think it's democratic and great, but there is a lack of variety in the photomedia that's being used. There's a lack of diversity in the photomedia that's being used, which leads to problem number 2, is that essentially people start to not care how it works. Do they really need to know how a camera works? How do they really need to know how photomedia it takes place? And this sort of points to a lot of the other things that have been going on about trying to bridge gaps in knowledge, trying to make science relatable, trying to make images relatable is partly what I'm trying to do, trying to make the processes relatable. So do we really need to know how cameras work? So this is important because if we, without this, we kind of have, if we're in a state where do we really need to know about it, then we have an issue where we have to start talking about belief. And this is where photomedia particularly is at the moment. A recent book by David Levi-Strauss's Photography and Belief, it highlights exactly this problem, is that historically photographs have been manipulated since day one. And this is not common knowledge. It's like Photoshop is the word we use for any manipulation, but it's much older than that. And to the point now that when I ask a student whether they can believe a photograph, they just tell me there's no facts in a photograph, so why should I believe it? Which is quite a concern moving forward and thinking about images in general. So this is rather worrying, so of sorts, at least for me. So it's important, like we're saying with scientists, like we're saying with science, it's important to show these real people doing real things, show that there's a story there, which is very obviously highlighted today in a good way. And it's important to, in the way we describe it, is that we describe it's important to evidence the mediation. So not mediating evidence, but evidencing mediation, which is a slight inverse of that. But the only time we ever seem to believe a photo is if we actually make it ourselves. So what you're seeing here is you're seeing the photograph that's being taken. And if you were to see the photograph by itself, you would be like, okay, so what is a picture? But when you see it paired with the picture being taken, there is a statement of grounding it as mediation that happened. Now, this may sound like common sense, but it tends to get lost in these platforms of social media, and it tends to get lost in these little personal practices that people develop. They don't connect the dots. They take photographs of their lunch every day, but they don't make a book about their lunch. They don't necessarily storyboard it or turn it into something a bit more. So this is something that I'm trying to kind of work on, is essentially to challenge against, or to sort of battle against these things like Instagram, which is great as a hope. It was a hope. it was ideal in so many ways, but unfortunately, like everything else, it just becomes about talking at people rather than talking with them. And despite what any advocates of Instagram might say, or any social media, it is essentially a platform for look at me, look at me, look at me. And that's not entirely helpful to the communities who we want to try and create empathy with and discussion with. So we do have to be mindful about social media in that sense. So this all sounds a bit dark, and I'm conscious that it's all going very dark, especially with this show a slide like this, which is an embarrassing sketch, I know. Given that there are some very technical diagrams in this conference. But I tend to sort of think that information and communication are rather cancelling each other out. And what we're left with is we're left with images which are sort of failing to communicate, and we're left with images which are failing to inform. Because in some sense we're reliant upon using a single image all the time to illustrate something, and that's ultimately where there's a problem here. So solutions, which I've got to try and get to and keep this as hopeful as possible. We all have two kinds of memory when taking photographs, and there's a photograph itself, right? There's a memory of the thing that you make, which you supposedly make to remember the thing instead, so you don't forget it. Even though some studies now suggest that the photographs replace the memory, which is another interesting topic in itself. However, there's also the memory you make when you're making the photograph, right? There's the memory of the gesture itself, and that's what I'm trying to tap into in my own work, and I'm trying to encourage students to develop within their design and within their visual communication, within their photography, because it's this aspect which creates opportunities for discussion and awareness of responsibilities, etc. So this is this builds on a lot of more recent work in photography, where there's a very reasonable argument that every photograph is a collaboration from absolute point zero, which means that it's an event. Every photograph is an event. The photographing is the event, and that's the point where communication takes place, not the photograph that's produced at the end of it. So it's trying to get into this little moment where things are being made, which is, it resonates a lot with the whole idea of trying to communicate science in general. So some suggestions on how to tap into this then. These are rough. I should note, and I hope that they provide some food for thought, really, for this session. I mean, while everyone's talking, I've been, scribbling down other thoughts as well. So, I mean, I'm quite happy to go to different places with some of these conversations. But one possible suggestion is to trust and work with photographers' methodologies. And I stress the methodologies here because there's a tendency to see photographers as being somebody who can deliver an image. But photographers have practices, and those practices are evolved over years. And they have their own stories to tell, and they tell them through their gestures. A good example of this is Mark Power with the maintenance body of work which he made for the Toei Corporation, who have been enlisting Magnum photographers for the last 4-5 years. I thought it was just for the Olympics, but it seems to be continuing. They've been getting photographers who have very particular ways of going about their work and getting them to just document the everyday in Tokyo. These are not trying to celebrate some final result or some conclusion. It's showing the everyday, it's showing the change, it's showing what real people live with and see. And these videos and photographs are shown on the subway, they're shown in subway stations, they're shown on the buses. And they're very humble, and they're very sort of 1950s photojournalism, which is not a bad thing to go back to, in a sense. So that's one suggestion. Another one is public visual workshops. It's been mentioned in this session that there were a lot of workshops and public engagement with schools and lectures dedicated to the science and understanding that, and that's fantastic. And I'm all for that. I'm rather worried that visual stuff gets lost along the way. So there are I do a lot of these sort of workshops where we're getting people to make cameras out of essentially beer cans. There's a lot of discussion about beer as well, connection to beer somehow. You can make an image like this with a pinhole camera, which shows this is ultimately 4 days time recorded during the winter. So we can do those sorts of things which are public. It's about creating conversation about the event, about making these pictures there and then, about the location, and getting this in turn creates discussion about the environment, about that local environment. That's second suggestion. The third suggestion is go cameraless, which may not seem to make much sense. Photo media without a camera would seem quite odd, but in science it's one of the oldest processes of recording data. Essentially, if you think about the cloud chambers, recording bubble chambers and recording particles moving around and stuff, very simply, lumen prints are the simplest way I can communicate to a student during a lecture that they are spending time in a session. Leaving your hand on a piece of paper like that for 20-30 minutes can result in images like this. It's a trace, it's a physical trace of what's there. It's not a camera produced image. It is nature. It is the physical laws of nature having an effect on the paper, which is produced with that in mind. So it's not what this paper is made. This paper is made for a darkroom to make black and white conventional prints, but it can be used as a tool to create conversation in a classroom, for instance. Or for recording the size of your child, sort of thing. And we have these other kinds of things as well, like this, which are much more sort of darkroom oriented. But again, it's just to sort of show you that you don't need a camera to make interesting images. And I think the public are kind of, certainly in Europe, there's a lot of interest in these cameraless approaches to making photographs today. Is kind of a niche little interest for people, and a lot of photography students are turning to it as well. So it can be sort of engaging and thought-provoking in various ways. You can even make a photograph of your phone without using the camera, which is quite interesting. Obviously, this dates back to things like cyanotypes from Anna Atkins and this whole idea of recording algae and biology and sorts of things. So there are many processes. I haven't listed any of the ones that have been recorded in part of physics. There are many. So this is really just a brief highlight, but it does hopefully give you some sense of what could be done, and I hope that this will go somewhere to generating, or at least maybe sort of expanding some ideas or discussions and thoughts. If not, at least maybe just inspiring some people. So that's all. That's pretty much from what I have to say. So thank you very much for your attention, and yeah.
Thank you very much. And very, very different view. And I think we get some idea from Gary's talk.
Lots of challenges.
Lots of challenges. Well, we've been through that challenges for decades, so it's 5 minutes past our planned time.
Okay.
So thank you very much, everyone, for attending. And
Thank you very much.
Yeah, hopefully we can make something happening from this discussion.
Yeah, definitely was very useful for me. So thank you so much, everybody.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank
you.
All right, thank you.
ありがとうございました。
ありがとうございました。
ありがとうございました。